Thank you very much. And the promotion of universal ethics is one of the key commitments of the Nobel Peace Prize recipient, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. And he would like to ensure that younger generations are equipped to handle the complex challenges of the interconnected and globalized world of 21st century. Therefore, Tibet House continues to follow the vision of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama in organizing these series of conferences and panel discussion, which we are happening today as well, on universal ethics, the vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for a peaceful world. And this one-day conference on universal ethics, wherein eminent scholars from various disciplines will share their valuable inputs and experiences for their well-being of humankind. Therefore, Tibet House organizes these series of conferences regularly. Now I would like to request Mr. Tenzin Kunkyabla, Secretary of Tibet House, to kindly introduce about the Tibet House and its activities.
Tashi Dilek, and good morning to all. Honorable Sikyong, Mr. Pemachring Chok, Srimati Dr. Nirupama Menon Rao ji, Professor Vivek Suneja ji, distinguished guests, chairpersons, speakers, our participants and students who are present here today. So to give a brief introduction of Tibet House, Tibet House, a cultural center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, New Delhi, was established in 1965 by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama for the purpose of preserving the cultural heritage of Tibet, as well as for providing a center for Tibetan culture and Buddhist studies. Over a period of 5 decades since its inception, Tibet House has come to be recognized as a significant institution for the dissemination of Tibetan culture and for Buddhist studies. Tibet House Museum has a collection of invaluable Tibetan arts and artifacts presenting Tibetan communities' religious heritage, ritual objects, and household articles. Our Tibet House Library has more than 5,000 volumes of rare manuscripts, books, and collection of Kangyu Tengyu, Tibetan transliterations of the teachings of Buddha and commentaries on teachings of Buddha. Tibet House has dedicated staff of research to support its prolific publishing and programming activities. We also support long-term and short-term research of scholars by providing them research scholarships. Our publication department initiated the reprinting works of the Podong Penjin Cholen Namge in 2008 with reference to the original manuscript kept in Tibet House, Delhi, and booklet format printed by Tibet House between 1970 to 81. Towards the end of 2021, Tibet House concluded the Podong project with a total of 113 pothis in each set, and so far we have published a total of 65 sets, of which 45 sets have been distributed as complementary to various monastic institutes. Tibet House regularly organizes special lectures, annual lectures, seminars, conferences, film screenings, and exhibitions. We also have a public discourses in Tibetan on Fridays and Saturday, as there are growing interest in Buddhist philosophy among Tibetans and Indians speaking Tibetan dialect. Tibet House also offers certificate courses on Buddhist philosophy, psychology, and Tibetan language. First, the Nalanda Master's Course. The first batch of Nalanda Master's Course, which was launched on 9 December 2016 on the occasion of 51st anniversary of Tibet House, in the gracious presence of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, along with Sri Kiran Rijuji, the former Union State Minister of Home Affairs. The event was attended by about 8,000 to 10,000 participants, and that was the start of the first batch of Nalanda Master's Course. So far, we have completed one batch of 5-year Nalanda Master's Course, 3 batches of 1-year diploma course, and a single batch of Nalanda certificate course. On 2nd October 2022, we started with the second batch of master's course after the successful completion of the first batch. So far, we have about 2,800 people from around 80 countries across all these courses. As you can find in your program kit, we have recently opened the registration for the fourth batch of Nalanda Diploma course, so the number of students across Nalanda courses may have crossed over 3,000. As for the Tibetan language course, to meet the needs of the aspirants, there are 4 levels of learning: beginner, intermediate, advanced, and proficiency. Till date, 23 batches have been completed, and the 24th batch began recently in December 2022. So that was a brief introduction of Tibet House. So without further ado, I request our program coordinator to proceed with the event. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kungepla. And now I would like to request Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdila, Director of Tibet House Culture Center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, New Delhi, to kindly present the souvenirs and kathas to our chief guests and our keynote speaker. Dr. Nirupama Menon Rao ji. Professor Vivek Suneja ji. Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdila is currently the director of Tibet House, New Delhi, the culture center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. While being assigned with the responsibility of the directorship of Tibet House, he also gives regular lectures and lead philosophy classes in Tibet House and other places as well. He travels widely within India and abroad to teach Buddhist philosophy, psychology, logic, and practice. He has also worked on several books as assigned by the Office of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He visited United States in 2008 to work with Professor Paul Ekman on His Holiness the Dalai Lama's book on Ethics for a New Millennium, Part 2, and the book series Art of Happiness, which were jointly written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, such as The Graded Path. He has written a number of papers for international and national conferences on the topics such as the paradox of brain and mind and ultimate reality, according to Arya Nagarjuna, and he is currently in the process of writing 2 important books, one entitled Journey into the Paradox of Brain and Mind, and other, What Constitute the Ultimate Reality, the Effects of Understanding the Ultimate Reality. Please welcome Venerable Geshe.
Respected Chief Guest, Honorable Sikyong, President of Central Tibetan Administration, Mr. Bemba Tsering, Dr. Nirupama Rao ji, Ambassador and former Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Government of India, and the author of her recent book, Fragmented Himalayas, and Professor Vivek Suneja, the former Pro-Vice Chancellor of Delhi University, and all the presenters for the conference, ladies, gentlemen. Also, I'm so glad that we have young students from Tonlin School. Welcome you all. Raise your hands. Wonderful. Thank you. So this topic for the conference, universal ethics. Those of us who are already here for this program for the last many years, which Tibet House organized thus far, and organizing and will organize, why this is a recurrent program is for the reason I'd like to take us all back to what triggered this program is for the reason that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, whenever addresses the public, be it within India or outside India. Experts always comes up with a question at the end of the address. The question is, where are we going wrong, the humanity? While the modern education, as I'm going to share with you more, while modern education is meant to give us the happiness, the world, harmony, the peace. On the contrary, the world is going down in terms of these values, in terms of happiness. Where are we going wrong? While the modern education is at the height of development. So His Holiness, without second thought, would say, it's simply because there is a hole there. There's a drawback there, the limitation there in the modern education system. So then this topic, universal ethics, it comes to play. So this is what I'd like to share a little more in the following the sharings. So and many of you already know about universal ethics. You heard about it a lot. And the key points, and also that the people who are involved in actively promoting the universal ethics in the world, for example, like the representatives from C learning, social emotional ethical learning here in India chapter, and also Ayurgyanyas here in India, and Delhi University also the promoting such programs, and there are various institutions. So there are some key points that we need to keep in mind. One is, what exactly is universal ethics? Number two, what's the core? Say, if you were to share the universal ethics in one word, what is that? Next, why do we need the universal ethics? Then the next, how to implement it. How to implement this universal ethics in the various institutions. And then the next is how to bring this from the one scale to the next scale, and eventually on the UNESCO level. So these are the key points that we need to discuss. And we also need to, particularly those people who are, say, involved with this program, involved in promoting this program, should consider these points. So they pertain to the conference which Tibet House has been organizing, considering the importance of the secular ethics. Every year, Tibet House organizes at least once the same conference, Universal Ethics, and oftentimes collaborated with other institutions. For example, Professor T.K. Mishraji, where are you? Raise hands. Raise hand. Professor T.K. Mishraji. Professor T.K. Mishraji? Huh? Oh, okay. Okay, right there. As I'm expecting him to be in the front row. Professor, we must know Professor T.K. Mishraji. He is a former vice principal of Ramanujan College, Delhi University. And he's very proactively engaged in introducing secular ethics in his college. And his students are as vibrant as the amazing the people with the initiative to introduce secular ethics, to help others to inculcate these qualities within them. So we have Professor T.K. Mishraji. I hope he will share some of his thoughts, some of his reflections, and his contributions to the participants here. So we collaborated with Ramanujan College for several years. And this also brought I'm compelled to share with you, or I can't resist to share with you Professor Vivek Sunejaji here, on the panel here, and he was the Pro-Vice Chancellor. He was then the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Delhi University back in 2012. And under his leadership, again, the Universal Ethics Program was introduced in Delhi University. And he was so proactively dynamic that actually within a short span of 1 year, he made it actually happen in 17 colleges under Delhi University. And the very next year, we intended to apply this to all the colleges under Delhi University. So it was a great effort of Professor Vivek Sunyaji. His deep admiration and adoration to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and seeing that this is the precious legacy of His Holiness to be shared with the world, whether you believe in religion or not. So this is efforts. And if you look at the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, adopted by the General Assembly UNO in September 2015, you look at these, you see that without the concept of, say, the universal ethics introduced as a part of modern education, these 17 goals cannot really be accomplished, to be very honest. Where, say, for example, this is a very important point which I share with people. For example, I said that in this hall, you are not supposed to shout. I shout. So if this is how it becomes so mechanical, even the universal ethics, the teaching universal ethics can become very mechanical. So the question is that these points, 17 SDGs adopted by UNO for the welfare of the citizens of the world, they can become too mechanized without any heart there, without any effect there. So how to make it a reality that the citizens of the world, they're benefited. So for this, again, universal ethics is the answer. Introducing this universal ethics in the modern education, this is the only answer, which is Holiness the Dalai Lama. More than what he does for Buddhism, he does for the universal ethics, for the world. So this is his legacy. So if you look at the current crisis, so we talk about Ukraine war. But before we point to the Ukraine war, look at our own families, fragmented families, domestic violence. Where is secular ethics? Where is universal ethics? So, problems in the family, to the communities, to the nations, to the whole world. All these crises, where are we going wrong? This question. So for this, we see that in the family, there's somebody there who is like a head of the family. In the community, they're heads. In the nation, there are leaders on different levels. And on a global level, there are also leaders there. So, when the leaders go wrong, for example, Ukraine war, who is responsible? Of course, there are many factors. It's not just one factor. So one major factor is the leadership. Just imagine His Holiness the Dalai Lama. All the world leaders, they are like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness, let's have a very, say, the nice, the imagination. That His Holiness emanates as leaders of all the big nations. Do you think that Ukraine war will happen? No, not at all. All the nations will come together in the spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood. So from this we see that the leaders play a huge role. And these leaders, they come from where? This next question. They come from an education system. And what is the education system of today's world? Think of this. This is the sheer legacy of the Britishers and the Americans. Back in 18th century AD, Industrial Revolution, where the cottage industries are transformed into mechanized, large-scale industries and factories. There's a huge demand on material development. There's huge demand on the brain, how to reproduce, how to make things on a large scale. So for this, a particular education system was developed. And that is which requires a sheer, say, the sophistication of the brain. So today's modern education is the legacy of that era. So where today, believe it or not, in the schools today, if you say, what is 2 plus 3? If you say 5, you pass. Everybody applauds and you pass. Even if you have the capacity, you have the potential to become the second Mahatma Gandhi. But if you say 2 plus 3 equals 5-ish, you fail. Nobody will count your competency to become the second Mahatma Gandhi. So this is modern education. It does not count your heart. It only counts the sophistication of your brain. It doesn't mean that the sophisticated brain is wrong. It is so important, so precious. For example, look at the various traffics. We need the traffic lights. These come only from the brain. So brain is required. But when the heart is lacking, this brain can take us to where we're not too sure. So today, the crisis in the world is all because of this, where there's a tremendous sophistication in the development of the brain, lacking the development of the heart. So, keeping this in mind, I also like to give an example of what is that like, the difference between brain development and heart development. Brain development lacking heart development, where there's heart development without brain development. Say 2 families. One family, all the family members are highly educated and affluent, so rich, but so much fights happening inside the family. I know these families. Some of you must be knowing these families. Looking for attention, looking for fighting over the responsibilities. This is not my responsibility, this is your responsibility. And you should also share the responsibility and so forth. Whereas another humble family, no education, no money, but everybody's there to help each other. Whatever, one piece of bread, everybody shares. You eat first. Look at these two. Look at these two. One has the education, one has the money. One doesn't have money, but look at the state of the plight of the family members there. So one, there's a heart there. It doesn't have the education, so-called modern education. It doesn't have money, but it has a beautiful heart there, which makes everything so warm. Anybody enters the house, although there's nothing, so scarce, so scanty, you enter there, you can feel the warmth there. Whereas the other one, you can feel the tension there. This is the difference. So today, the world, we need the education of the heart. So with this in mind, we see that the Mahatma Gandhi, initially, he was not Mahatma. He was referred to as a Gandhi, M.K. Gandhi. And later, he became the Mahatma Gandhi. What made him become a Mahatma Gandhi? Education-wise, he was the same person before he became Mahatma and after he became Mahatma. He was the same person with the same education degree. But what made him become Mahatma? The day, the heart for the whole nation, 340 million Indians, the population of India then. The moment he generated this heart for the whole population of India, this heart was generated, he became Mahatma. He was thrown out of the train with his baggage, while he had the proper, legitimate ticket, AC ticket, but he was thrown out. Then he did not say that, oh, I'm thrown out. No, India was thrown out. 340 million Indians were thrown out of the train. So he built a heart. He generated a heart for the whole India. That made him Mahatma Gandhi. So let's all keep in mind that this is what His Holiness wants people, wants the whole world, wants the whole education system to inculcate this quality of the heart, good heart. And how to bring this heart that everybody, just as one values 2 plus 3 equals 5, people should equally value the good heart. How to make it happen. This is why His Holiness is advocating the universal ethics. Ethics of the heart, which to be embraced universally, and the quality which exists universally across the board of humanity. Okay, so with this in mind, we see that today, as the vision of His Holiness, the mission undertaken by Emory University under the the heading Social, Emotional, Ethical Learning, C Learning, and also Ayurgyanyas here in India. And there are many other institutions who undertake in their own ways of inculcating this quality of educating the heart as a part of the modern education system. So let us all pray and endeavor, not only pray, but endeavor to make this a reality in your family, in your institution, in the world, and eventually bring it to UNESCO, on the table of UNESCO. Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Geshe-Tejil Amdullah. Now may I request our Chief Guest, Honorable Sikong Mr. Pemba Cho, to kindly share the few words on this conference, and please allow me to introduce Honorable Sikong Mr. Pemba Cho is the President of the Central Tibetan Administration, and he was sworn in as the Sikong of the Central Tibetan Administration and the Tibetan people at an official ceremony graced by His Holiness the Dalai Lama in 2021. In 1996, he was elected as a member of Tibetan Parliament in exile from Dome constituency. As a member of the Tibetan Parliament, later in 2001, he was re-elected as the member of Tibetan Parliament, during which he took on the role of Executive Director of Tibetan Parliamentary and Policy Research Center, a research agency based in New Delhi. Yes. His effort as the Executive Director of TPPRC in the constant outreach effort directed towards Indian political leaders led to the successful revival of the All-Party Indian Parliamentary Forum for Tibet. In 2008, after his re-election to a third term as a member of the Tibetan Parliament, Sikong Mr. Pemba Cho was elected as the Honorable Speaker of the 14th Tibetan Parliament in exile. In 2011, he was elected to a fourth term as a member of the 15th Tibetan Parliament in exile, and was duly elected as the Speaker through a majority vote. Please welcome Honorable Sikong Cho.
I pay my homage to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and preceded by my respects to the Sangha community. I also pay my respect to Nirupama Raoju, to whom I have a lot of respect. And when I was the speaker, I had the opportunity to meet her in Dharamsala, along with Professor Samdharam Sheh, who is another person to whom I have immense respect. So I'm very happy to be sharing this dais with you again. And then Professor Vivekji is also a very preeminent personality. And Geshe Amdullah, I was just telling him that my 10 minutes should actually go to him, because I'm a very ordinary person. I'm not a scholar, I'm not an academic, I'm not a researcher, so I cannot speak in a systematic manner as to how a researcher would do that. But talking about today's subject, universal ethics, I thought I will try to relate that with my own life as to how I changed myself from what I tried to learn from His Holiness directions. So when we were child, you can imagine our parents came from Tibet and we had no skill. In the beginning, we were not used to the Indian climate, we were not used to Indian diet. So many people died because of these problems, and eventually with the help of Indian government, our people were put up in the foothills of Himalayas where the climatic conditions are a little more suitable. And later, Tibetans were moved to compact communities. And in Karnataka, where Madam right now lives in Bangalore, is the first state to offer us 3,000 acres of land for the first 3,000 Tibetans who came to South India. And then we requested for more and more, and now we have 5 settlements in South India, which is the largest concentration of Tibetans outside Tibet. Many people believe that Dharamsala has the largest number of Tibetans, which is not so. And Karnataka has been a very good host to us Tibetans in that state. And of course, other states have also offered rehabilitation facilities for the Tibetans. And we are the first generation of Tibetans who are born in exile. So we have never seen Tibet. I have never seen Tibet. To fulfill my emotional needs, I try to go on the border areas as much as possible so that I can see Tibet from this side of the fence, and imagine that it would be quite similar to the other side of the fence. And when we were young, our parents, of course, used to tell us stories about Tibet and how the situation evolved and what kind of difficulties that we went through. So that, at a very young age, inculcated a sense of responsibility. Because to fulfill any kind of job, whether it's ethics or whatever, you have to have a sense of responsibility. So that sense of responsibility was ingrained in our mind at a very young age. So I was, from a very young age, committed to serving my community, at least in this life. Because as His Holiness says, you cannot change your blood or bone. In this life, if you are a Tibetan, you cannot change everything. So you have a responsibility also. Then when we were growing up, we used to hate the Chinese, any Chinese for that matter, whether it's a leader or an ordinary Chinese. In our mind those days, we were so angry about China that we used to think that if a Chinese person comes to our settlement, we would beat him up or kill him or those kind of things. But later, listening to His Holiness always says that it's a leadership. Again, in Buddhist philosophy, you don't blame the person who commits because the person is ignorant. Person doesn't know what kind of wrong or right or wrong thing that person is committing. So we have to correct the action. Those thinkings that it's leadership, not the people. The people are also suffering inside China. So that insight made us feel one with the Chinese people, not get angry with them. So that's how His Holiness thinking shaped our mind. And in terms of the, right now we have about 288 Buddhist monasteries and nunneries that are registered with the Religion and Culture Department. And there are about 42,000 monks and nuns. And today, about 66% of these 42,000 monks and nuns are from the Himalayan region. So we are proud to say that even though we are refugees, we are taking care of people from independent countries, India, Nepal, and Bhutan, in educating them religiously on religious matters. And another 6,000 Indian children in Tibetan schools. So we are supporting about 34,000 Indians, Nepalese, and Bhutanese. Even we receive help from the Indian government, and then we also give back to the community that we live in. And at one time, I used to think that, oh, all the Tibetan monks are working very hard to build these monasteries, and it's going to be taken over by the Himalayan people. That is because of my narrow-minded thinking. But His Holiness had this bigger vision that Himalayan people would be the ones who would be responsible for carrying on the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism into this world. Now it is proving to be true. So all these realizations kept coming as and when His Holiness started advising. And Gishi Tamdila also referred to the problems in education. And it's very rare that a speaker gets to travel with His Holiness, and this happened during my time. I accompanied His Holiness to London, and one popular politician came to meet His Holiness, and I was present at that meeting also. And the first question that came from the politician is that we have a lot of problem with the youth in London, because those days there were some issues happening on the streets also. violent incidents happening on the street. So he asked that, and His Holiness' immediate response was, everything is wrong with education. So because of the modern education, the whole purpose of our living is to bring happiness to yourself and others. Now, in the pursuit of modern education, we believe that materialism alone will bring happiness, which is not at all the truth. So if you have one, you need two, you have two, you need three, so your needs keeps multiplying as and when you grow materially. But when you grow mentally, your needs keep going down. That is the difference. So these are some of the issues that comes to my mind. And in 2016, when I was representative, 17, when I was representative of His Holiness in the United States, there was a conference organized by scientists with many chief executive officers of huge companies around the world. And then one business person asked His Holiness, how can we train compassion in 1 week or in a course? His Holiness said, never, this cannot be done. All these values has to be inculcated, imbibed, and practiced on a daily basis. So when a politician gets up on a stage and talks about ethics, normally it doesn't work because they say something and they do something else. And most of the time, their objectives are very short-sighted, just to get, just to win election the next time round. So many things go wrong, even with nations. Now, when you look at China also, many nations thought that material development will bring happiness to their countries. Now I'm visiting Europe, and now many of the European countries realize that what they've been doing with China is wrong. Now, the change of perception is there, but how that will translate on the ground in terms of realistic policies and programs is something to be seen. So these habits to preserve our values cannot be instant. It has to be cultivated over time, every single day. Even for myself, I keep asking this question from the time you wake up in the morning to the time you go to sleep. When His Holiness decided to devolve his political and administrative responsibilities, a lot of people talked about, oh, now the Tibetan administration has separated church from politics. And His Holiness was asked this question, whether this separation of church and the state is good or not, or was it? Then His Holiness said, if a politician is guided by religious values, moral values, then it's good. So from the time you wake up in the morning till the time you go to sleep, you have to analyze yourself as to what you did during the day, throughout the day, what good things you did, what bad things you did. So you have to have the capacity for self-critical analysis. If you don't have that, you will always be pointing fingers at others, where you don't know that 3 other fingers are being pointed at yourself. Oftentimes when you get angry, when you get disillusioned, you try to find others to blame. You never look into yourself as to who's to blame. Are you yourself responsible? So understanding the interdependence nature of our existence, that itself also gives us a lot of solace in our thinking. I also give this very simple Buddhist thinking about mental disposition and inclinations, kamdamyoba. So just as we are 8 billion people in this world, you won't find another Professor Vivekji similar like him in physical description anywhere in the world. Tibetans always have a saying that they are similar people, not exact people. So just like we have so many physical differences in this world amongst all these 8 billion people, there are that many mental dispositions, differences. And these mental dispositions and inclinations are dictated by your experiences since you were born into the community that you are born, the friends and the circles of friends and teachers and all these, that shapes your mind. Even a twin even if they are born together and lived all their life together, they are also never the same. So not one single person is same as another. If you understand that concept, then you can understand the naturalness of differences of opinion. Then you don't have to get angry just because the other person is saying something different from how you perceive it. Because the other person is saying based on his or her own experience. If you are a Buddhist or if you are a believer in another religion that believes in life after death, then we are again talking about lives, many lives before this life. It's accumulation of all those experiences. But even if you don't believe in life after death, from the time you are born, your mind is being shaped through all the things that you see, hear, and learn. And to be a good person, of course, ethics is nothing but the ability to decide between what is wrong and what is right. So that there has to be a constant monitoring system in your mind as to what you are doing is right or wrong. Because at a certain point, we are not the same. When we were kids, we think differently. When we grow up a little bit, we think differently. When we're working, we think differently. Because it's all the circumstances, the environment that shapes us. And if we can be in a good position to follow the moral and ethical values that we need to, then you can guide other people around you. You need not follow other people in the wrong path. And in my case also, as politicians now, of course, Tibetans, I don't know whether you can really call us politicians or not. We would rather be called as social workers because we serve the community. And here also, I tell my friends, the parliament session is my retreat session. We meet only for 10, 12 days during one session, 2 times in a year. So members ask so many different kind of questions, and then you have to concentrate your mind to take note of the questions, because there has to be a sincerity in your effort, whether it's answering a foolish question or a wise question, whatever, it doesn't matter. A question is a question, depending on who's asking it and their mental capability of understanding. So if you have to concentrate to write the questions, you have to concentrate to reply to them, and meditation is nothing but concentration. So if you manage to concentrate in the right manner, that's good meditation. And then some members say rough things, bad things, then you practice tolerance. And some members sometimes insinuate something. It's either your words or it's coming from somewhere else. And you realize that if you're a little bit good in psychology, you understand your surrounding very well. So then you practice compassion. So I consider my parliament session as retreat session. And it's good because there is no burden on your head. That you have a responsibility, that I'm answerable, we are responsible, and we are accountable to the house. We know our responsibility, we maintain that responsibility and follow through. I also tell my cabinet colleagues and also the executive members, if we focus more on what we need to do, that will show the result. If we spend only 50% on our work and 50% on politics, then the result will be only 50% of what we do. And people will judge us from what we did, not from what we said. Because saying is easy. Everybody can talk about huge, big things, but practicing is different. Even Kishila also. Saying is easy, but practicing is more difficult, very, very difficult. So we need to understand the concept, but put more effort on practice. How much ever little, take it forward. But if you don't practice, how much ever you study, it's of no use. So these are some of the things that I learned from His Holiness, some nuggets of wisdoms. Just as we say, then when I speak, of course there are a lot of young people here. So when you get angry with your teacher or mother, first you ask yourself, what was the reason that you got angry? Are you to blame, or are you looking at other? And we believe that there are multiple causes and conditions that makes an event happen. So it's not only one cause and condition. If you are only by yourself, there are no other causes and conditions. When as as social animals, when we have to live in a community, there are so many other causes and conditions. Now, if you look at all other causes and conditions, the blame also gets distributed. So you don't feel anger for that particular person. So these are small, small things. Like Shanti Dev was, if there is a solution, why worry? If there is no solution, why worry? So if you're going to an airport, you have to make sure that you reach on time. But because of certain reasons, whether traffic jam or accident or whatever, if we are not able to reach them, it doesn't help scolding the driver. Because then driver might get angry and he might try some other things and might have an accident and land up in more problem. So it's better to relax and think that, okay, now I'm not able to catch the flight, what is the next plan? Instead of getting bothered and getting angry with others, it doesn't serve any purpose. So such small things help us in shaping our life, help us in overcoming small challenges, because we always have faced challenges, big or small. So it's all in the head as to how, of course, warmthness in the heart, but warmthness alone cannot bring all that happiness. So you have to use your mind also how to get there. So it has to be an effort from individual to community to nations to universal. So it's either top down or bottom up. So whichever way, we all have to strive towards making this world a better place to live in. And there are so many issues. I think there are so many topics that you have outlined here where other academicians and scholars are going to speak about. So I thank Tibet House very much for their work, and also Dr. Nirupama Raoji for taking up the mantleship of the Vice Chairperson of Tibet House at the instance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I know she has a lot of respect for His Holiness, and she has this intention to carry forward His Holiness thinkings in this world. And I want to thank you again for taking up this responsibility and leading Tibet House. And Geshe Damdula, he's always here. So if we let him speak, he'll speak for 2 hours, because that is normal for Tibetan monks, lamas, because when they teach, they have to teach in detail. So today's 10 minutes is very short for him. That's why I was telling him you should have taken my 10 minutes also so that he can speak more. But he's always available. And I just want to close by saying on the day, the first time I had a virtual meeting with His Holiness after I took over, on the second day, I received a phone call saying His Holiness forgot to tell me something. So on the second day, His Holiness said, I decided not to continue with the Nalanda project. Just recently, as you must have seen, His Holiness inaugurated the Dalai Lama Institute for Ancient Tibetan and Indian Ancient Studies. That will continue. But His Holiness thought that promoting the Nalanda Institute idea is a kind of self-promotion, and that His Holiness may be accused of spreading Buddhism, because according to Buddhism, you are not supposed to spread Buddhism. Even if you are learned, you cannot say, I am learned, I want to teach you Buddhism. No, it has to come from the disciples. Please teach us on this topic or that topic. So there is no conversion, there is no all of this. So, so His Holiness said that there should be more Tibet houses in India, because the job that the Tibet House here, which was established way back in 1965, is doing a very good job with all the courses that they have and more coming in. His Holiness thinks that more Tibetan houses in different cities of India would be helpful. So these are some of the topics that maybe we need to discuss post-conferences and see how we can make an effort to fulfill the wishes. And His Holiness thinks that the 2 subjects, the middle way and logic, should be the top subject to teach, not necessarily the religious part of Buddhism, but more the philosophical and the logic part of Buddhism. So please, let's work towards getting His Holiness wishes done, if not all, at least some of it during our time. And I look forward to have some meetings on this. And thank you very much for getting me here. It's really an honor to be sharing this dais with so many respected personalities, distinguished personalities, and I think in the next session I'll be learning more. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Kongosegan Shaw. And now I would like to request Shrimati Dr. Nirupama Menon Raoji, former Foreign Secretary, Government of India, and a Vice Chairperson, Tibet House Society, to kindly share a few thoughts on this conference. And please allow me to introduce. Shrimati Dr. Nirupama Menon Raoji is a retired Indian diplomat, Foreign Secretary, and Ambassador. She joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1973. And during her 4 decades-long diplomatic career, she held several important assignments. She was India's first women spokesperson in the Ministry of External Affairs, New Delhi, and the first women High Commissioner from her country to Sri Lanka, and the first Indian women ambassador to the People's Republic of China. She served as the India's Foreign Secretary from 2009 to 2011. At the end of her term, she was also appointed as the India's ambassador to the United States, where she served for a term of 2 years from 2011 to 2013. Dr. Rao has continued to pursue her academic interests in and taught and undergraduate seminars at Brown University titled India in the World in 2015 to 2016. She's author of the books on India's China relationship entitled Telling It on the Mountain, India, Tibet, and China, 1949 to 1962, published by Penguin. Please welcome Dr. Nirupama Raoji.
Tashiteleg, namaste, and good morning. Honorable Sikyong, Mr. Penpa Shering, Venerable Geshe-la, Professor Vivek, and distinguished guests present here, as well as young students. It's so good to see so many young faces in the audience today, because you are the future. The future is in your hands, and you must take the world forward to a much better place. I'm extremely honored and privileged to be here at this conference organized by Tibet House, New Delhi, together with the panel discussion on universal ethics, the vision of His Holiness the Dalai Lama for a peaceful world. When I was thinking about what I should speak on this morning, the first thing that came to mind was this, you can call it bhajan or hymn or invocation, composed in the 1960s and based on the Hindu scriptures, the Upanishads, by His Holiness the Shankaracharya of Kanchi. And it was on the subject of friendship among nations. And I always think of this whenever I think of peace and dialogue and diplomacy, which has been my profession and the craft that I have practiced. The invocation is called Maitrim Bhajata. And Maitrim Bhajata essentially is a prayer written by Sri Chandrasekharendra Saraswati, who was the Shankaracharya of Kanchi at that time. And it was performed by Bharat Ratna Srimati M.S. Subbulakshmi at the United Nations in 1966. It is an ode to friendship among nations. And this is the translation. I thought I should read it out because it expresses, I think, the essence of all that we try to do in our work to promote peace and dialogue among people and to, as they say, in order to sweat in peace and not bleed in war. So I'll read the words. Cultivate friendship to conquer all hearts. Look upon others as yourself. Renounce war, forsake competition, give up aggression on others. Mother Earth is ready to grant all our desires. The Lord, our Father, is merciful to all. Restraint, generosity, and compassion. Damyata, Tibettv, and of course, compassion, self-restraint. People of the world, may all people be happy and prosperous. I wanted to start with this invocation because I thought this is the spirit that infuses this auditorium this morning. People have come here with good intentions, and I recognize, and we all recognize that. I think for all of us, we must, we spoke about the Himalayas, about the Himalayan peoples and their connections with the people of Tibet. And I look back at history, and this is something I wrote about in my book, The Fractured Himalaya, that is the title, the published title, India, Tibet, China, 1949 to 1962. It was published by Penguin India in 2021. A paperback edition has just come out to mark the 60th anniversary of the conflict between India and China of 1962. And the whole story of Tibet, of course, is bound up in that history. And we must have respect for that history. We cannot change it. And that is what I wrote about in my book, based on my research of papers, not only here in the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, but also in London in the British Archives, in the memoirs of people like Hugh Richardson, and also papers that are available in the United States. And I looked at it from the point of view of a practitioner. So I have been practicing the profession of diplomacy, as was mentioned, for more than 4 decades. And the whole eye or the perspective that I brought to the study of this subject was from the point of view of a practitioner. So it was not an academic study, but more a practitioner's account. So I think to the young people in this audience, I would say, regard your life as a pilgrimage and an exploration, and try to bring people together in what you do. The poet laureate of India, Gurudev Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, used to speak of the mango grove. All of us love mangoes, but have you thought of the mango grove? Trees growing in a garden, all mango trees, that's the mango grove. In Sanskrit, we say the Amra Kunj, the mango grove that brings people together. So try and cultivate that spirit in what you do. And since many of us here in this audience are Indians, think of Swami Vivekananda. And Swami Vivekananda's message applies to all of us, regardless of where we come from or which nation we belong to. And that is the spirit of Prabuddha Bharat, an awakened and enlightened country. And you must be part of that awakening and enlightenment. And here I come back again to the connections between our Himalayan peoples and the Tibetan peoples. Today we have borders between nations, and these borders become very fixed and they become very militarized. As you know, today between India and China, we have this confrontation in the high Himalayas, in the most formidable geography in the world. But the people of these borderlands, the people on both sides of this frontier, have always been connected, and today they have been, I think, separated because of politics, geopolitics, and the differences between countries. But that spirit of togetherness, I don't believe can be discounted, because there is that spiritual heritage that binds our people, and there is that cultural connection that we cannot really break, and the languages, the ethnicities, so many things bind the people of the Himalayas to the people of Tibet. And today when Geshe-la and Mr. Pempa Sering spoke about the Tibetan settlements in various parts of the country, including Karnataka, where I now reside in the city of Bangalore. You again think of these connections. Everywhere you go in the Himalayas, you see that those muffled footsteps of history that really beat in the blood of all the people who live in these areas. And I think we must never forget the people of the borderlands. I always have tried to stress that. And the study of these regions and a focus on what happens there is important, not only from the point of view of history, but from the point of view of all the effects and the connections that those areas have with the rest of the country. You just think of climate, you just think of the environment, you think of water, you think of the way the monsoon plays out across the whole land, this great land of India, so connected to what happens in the Himalayas. So, as they say, I think there is, in the Bible, they say, look up to the mountains from where our strength comes. And many of our scriptures have the same outlook. Don't forget that part of the world. It is so connected with what we are. I think when I speak of an awakened and enlightened country and the generation of youth that has to work on that aspect, think of humanism as a religion, not the various religions that we belong to or we practice. I think we must understand that if we are to be one of the greatest democracies, we say oldest democracy, largest democracy. I think we must aspire to be the greatest democracy in the world. And that is really based on these qualities of humanism. And to define freedom, the freedom that our forefathers like Mahatma Gandhi ji gave to us, define that freedom on the basis of inclusion, of tolerance, reason and logic. His Holiness the Dalai Lama speaks of that logic, that spirit of debate, which has always defined, I think, Tibetan religion and the culture and just the ambience of all that you do. I think they are very much Indian values also. It speaks of the connection between our two peoples. It speaks of what Emperor Ashoka did, the Prince of Peace, when he took Buddhism, when his daughter and son went to Sri Lanka and brought the message of Buddhism. As you said, not to proselytize and not to spread Buddhism in the sense that any concept of force was involved, but through persuasion, to be able to influence people's minds just by the spirit of debate and persuasion and understanding. And Gandhiji used to speak of viveka, viveka meaning the faculty that distinguishes right from wrong. That is what I think you as young people should inculcate, that spirit of viveka in your minds. And do not be obsessed with what happened in the past. You're not here to think of the connections between the present and the past, but you're here to think of the connections that you can make, that you can forge, that you can create between the present and the future. Because that is what you have to focus on, the present and the future. And that is what, Sri Aurobindo ji used to say. Think of the connections between the present and the future. So that, you all are karma yogis, think of yourself as karma yogis, but cultivate the concept of swa-kranti. That is, the revolution has to come from within. You're not here to create, revolutions are often associated with force and conflict, but there can be a revolution within yourselves where you're constantly asking questions, trying to understand, improve, seek a sense of perfection. That is really what the revolution within can be. You are part, as young people, of a global population of 1.4 billion young people. And there are different categories. Understand, you are students here. There are different categories of youth. In many ways, they reflect the state of the world. There are students like you, there are migrant laborers, there are rural people, there are tribal youth, there are youth who are at risk for various reasons in society. There are victims of violent conflict, there are dropouts, there are all kinds of young people whose needs have to be addressed. So when we talk of a demographic dividend, first let's focus on the demographic itself and understand how we can generate dividends by helping these young people and inculcating in them that spirit of seeking a better world. Because, today youth have been affected in many ways. Think of COVID. Think of the impact of COVID on our young people. And what has happened, many of them have not been able to pursue their education in an unbroken way. I see a lot of discussion today on the impact of how school children have been affected by COVID, and their learning skills have been affected. Their math and reading skills have been victims of what has happened during COVID. It has been quite a tragic experience for these young people. I think they have been really the victims of this pandemic. So I think for them, we have to think in a compassionate way to see how we can help them overcome these gaps, these difficulties that they are facing now. And most importantly, I think among youth today, although we live in a globalized world and technology has united all of us, I think it's very important to inculcate a culture of cosmopolitanism in our youth. Of course, you come from a local area, but think beyond that. Connect the local with the global, connect the local with the rest of the country. Never be partisan or parochial in your approach. I think the goal is Sarvodaya. Gandhiji used to speak of Sarvodaya, the benefit and well-being of all. That is really how we can create a charter of compassion, as people speak of, and understand that the weakness of one is the weakness of all. It's not that we can be strong while the others are weak, or we can be better off while the others are not so fortunate as we are. So there is a cosmos, I think, of connections between all of us, and nothing human should be foreign to us. So wherever people come from, there's no question of somebody being a foreigner and you being, part of the system. And I'd like to talk a little about peace. I began with what this invocation Maitrim Bhajata spoke of generosity, compassion, and self-control. Peace is not just the absence of war. Peace is really, relating yourself to understand the sound of the universe, which is very peaceful. There is no Big Bang, theory out there anymore. It's a blissful place. And there's a sense of calm, of being safe in mind and in body. And that sense of wholeness. And there's the Hebrew word shalom, I think, which expresses that very, very beautifully. And think of that sense of wholeness. And I think as far as war is concerned, Venerable Geshe-la spoke about the war in Ukraine. Obviously, we cannot make a game out of war. It's not a video game that we can play. This is the vilest thing possible, as Leo Tolstoy, the Russian writer, used to say. War is the vilest of things. And if you read the letters of young soldiers written to their parents from the front, going back hundreds of years, you understand how people suffer during war, to be mired in the mud of trenches and to hear the explosions around you. It can be extremely devastating. So I think there is an audacity today, particularly in a war-torn world, to think of peace. Be audacious enough to think of peace and sweat in peace rather than bleed in war, as the saying goes. And I think the chariot of victory, as Valmiki's Ramayana speaks of the chariot of victory, and it has to be built on valor, and obviously victory comes with valor, but also with fortitude on the basis of truth And strength, discretion, benevolence, and self-restraint are really the horses of that chariot of victory. And you have to harness it with these horses, with the reins of forgiveness. That's what peace entails, of compassion and humanity. Now, I'd like to not close without coming to something that's very important to me. The role and the presence and the significance of the life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I first met His Holiness when I was 9 years old, and my parents took me to this railway station in Lucknow, where we used to stay at that time. And I remember entering that compartment in the train and seeing a young His Holiness over there, and he spoke. I don't remember the conversation. I was very young, but I still have, a very dog-eared autograph book with the autograph of His Holiness signed on 14th February 1960. Happened to be Valentine's Day also. But I have that autograph with me, and I treasure it very much. And that became a kind of a curtain raiser, I feel, for a lifelong connection with the Tibetan people and His Holiness particularly. Through my profession, I became a diplomat, in many ways inspired, I think, by the story of His Holiness and his experience in Tibet, and then his life in exile here in India. And it was such an epic story that it inspired me very deeply. And perhaps I'm here before you because of that, in many ways, because of that connection. And through my career, of course, I did keep closely in touch with His Holiness. And when I wrote my book, when I was researching my book, I made a journey to Dharamsala in 2014 and was able to speak to His Holiness. And much of what he told me in that interview is reflected in my book. So I urge you to read that account also, which made the whole story of Tibet a part of what I have written. It's not just the story of India and China at that time, but also the story of Tibet, which many of us tend to overlook or perhaps, have somehow erased in many of us from the memory, which should not be so. But His Holiness has stressed the need for foundational values in whatever we do, of peace and reconciliation. He never talks of, animosity. I don't think we can harbor animosity in our hearts to fellow humans. I think we have to understand the other side and to be able to inculcate a spirit of give and take, I believe. Otherwise, negotiations can never succeed and peace can never be achieved. I think there has to be that recognition of understanding that we share this world, and we share it in trust for future generations. It's not ours to destroy or ours to discard, perhaps, or to make a lesser place. That is not our duty. And we would be failing in our responsibility if we did that. So we need a compassionate world, as His Holiness says, built through education, built through good education. And that is really what we are here to speak about. And His Holiness speaks of the need for internal disarmament, not just external disarmament, but internal disarmament. You have to cultivate that calm mind of the spirit of dialogue, of bridge building. In my retirement, I, of course, have written this book and I've taught, but one of the things I hold very dear to my heart is to somehow, through citizen diplomacy, because I'm here before you as an ordinary citizen, but all of us as citizens can practice diplomacy. And I, together with my husband, set up a trust called the South Asian Symphony Foundation, which is really a trust to build peace in our region of South Asia, which is not really as integrated as it should be. in order to build bridges through the medium of music. Because a symphony orchestra, I feel, in many ways is a model for what society should be. Because, like all of you are sitting here, musicians share desks, they work together, and they create harmony in the metaphor, as it were, in the structure of an orchestra. And that is what we tried to do, and we have brought together people, as of now, from 10 countries, mainly South Asian. I wish we could include Tibetan musicians in that. Maybe at some stage we will. But our concerts are called peace notes. And I think this conference itself is a peace note in many ways. You know, we may not be playing music, but we are speaking in a harmonious way, which I think is the true north. You know, when you think of a compass, you're looking at the north. What is the true north? The true north is to create that moral compass within all of us. And the World Economic Forum calls the moral compass the most overlooked leadership skill. And that is the thing all of you should internalize within yourselves, that moral compass that can give you a sense of purposeful direction. So I will stop here and wish you all the best for the new year particularly, and for the future, for a world built on the basis of compassion and understanding that we share this planet together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Srimati Dr. Nirupama Raoji. And now I would like to request our guest of honor and the keynote speaker, Professor Vivek Suneja ji, former Pro Vice Chancellor, Delhi University, and current Head and Dean, Faculty of Management Studies, to kindly, I request you to kindly take over the stage and kindly give us thoughts on this conference. And please allow me to introduce, I'm sorry. Professor Vivek Suneja ji is a former Pro Vice Chancellor at Delhi University and current Head and Dean of the Faculty of Management Studies, University of Delhi. As a Felix Scholar, he studied for his doctoral degree at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. For over a decade, he taught at the various premier universities in Britain, including at the University of Salford, Manchester, and at the Open University. Upon his return to India, he joined Professor as Strategic Management, and he has served as a Dean Planning and the Pro Vice Chancellor of the University of Delhi. Professor Vivek Suneja ji has published several books and papers in the areas of strategy, marketing, economic, ethics, culture, and public policy. Please welcome Professor Vivek Suneja ji. Please. Thank you.
His Excellency Honorable Sikyong, the President of the Central Tibetan Administration, Mr. Pempa Shering, Her Excellency Dr. Nirupama Menon Rao, Venerable Geshe Doji Damdul, my friend, philosopher, and guide, the Secretary of Tibet House, Mr. Tenzing Kungkyap, Tenzin Doma, the Sangha community, all dear friends, and I can recognize some old friends, Renukaji of the Tushita Center, Professor Mishra, Ramanujan College, all friends, both here and in cyberspace. It's a great honor to be here. Can we begin by observing 1 minute of silence and pray that all sentient beings be free of suffering and from the causes of suffering, and that His Holiness the Dalai Lama have a long, healthy life, and his aspiration that all sentient beings be free from suffering and from the causes of suffering are fulfilled. That's all he does in everything he does. So can I request for a minute, let's close our eyes and wish His Holiness that his dreams come true. Thank you. When the Dalai Lama has been asked the question, what are your religious beliefs? His answer has been simple and straightforward. My religion is kindness. There are two principles which underlie His Holiness' vision of universal ethics. One, our common humanity. All human beings, all sentient creatures suffer and wish to be free from the causes of suffering. That unites us all, not just humans, all animals, all sentient creatures in the cosmos. And second, interdependence. We're in this together. When the Buddha taught his sermon on the Four Noble Truths, the sermon on suffering and its cessation, the word he used for suffering was dukkha. And in Sanskrit, the word that is often used as to the cause of suffering is written as trishna. And English, of course, being Indo-European language derived from Sanskrit, the word thirst comes from trishna. So, it's often said the cause of suffering is trishna, thirst, craving, sometimes just called desire. But the Buddha, of course, did not teach in Sanskrit because he was not elitist. He wanted his word to go to the masses. So he taught in Pali, or Magathi Prakrit at that time. And the word he used was tanha. Now, those of you who know North Indian languages would know what tanha means, right? Tanha means loneliness. In Avastan, which where Persian comes from, Iranian language, Persian comes from, derived from Sanskrit, and that's how it's come to be in common usage. These are all common Indo-European languages. Tanha means a sense of loneliness, a sense of isolation, a sense of lack of connection, alienation, a lack of not being fulfilled or complete. Tanha. And the Buddha then said, where does this sense of tanha come from? The sense of isolation, lack of connection, not feeling fulfilled, unease. And he said it stems from holding a wrong view of the nature of reality and the nature of the self. So there's a fundamental ignorance, an avidya, a misperception, to regard oneself as an isolated, absolute, separate self, separate from the rest of existence. And if one holds such a view, one absolutely existent self, then one has cut off oneself from the rest of sentient creatures. And then, of course, the law of the jungle will prevail. Myself against yourself. Perpetual conflict, comparison, competition, ability to control, feeling insecure that someone's self is greater than myself. Constant conflict. No wonder we have wars. What is the right view then, which can dispel this wrong view? Simply dispel the illusion of an independently existing self, the truth of Anat. And of course, this is about wider reality as well, not just about the self. There's interdependence in the phenomenal world. All events in the phenomenal world are connected. The truth of shunyata. So if there is tanha, and one does not realize the truth of shunyata, then there will obviously be unease. There will be dukkha, psychological suffering, a lack of feeling of completion or fulfillment. The word holy, H-O-L-Y, of course, comes from the word whole. If you feel whole, you're holy. Otherwise, there's tanha. And to escape this psychological suffering, this dukkha, one can try and find relief in innumerable distractions and pleasures, but never succeed, since the disease has not been properly diagnosed. Hence the insatiable thirst, the trishna, derived from tanha, for objects that one hopes will relieve this dukkha, born of tanha. But as the saying goes, you can drink all the waters of the 7 oceans of the world. It will not quench your thirst. You'll only get thirstier. There is no other recourse, no other solution than to realize the truth of oneself and the universe. A few days ago, last week, Venerable Geshe Doji Damdul sent me a New Year greeting, and I want to read that to you. Dear Vivekji, on the Happy New Year, may all your virtuous aspirations be fulfilled spontaneously for the benefit of all dear Mother sentient beings. That's the most brilliant New Year greeting I ever received, and I want to repeat it, and we'll then dissect and analyze it, much like Nagarjuna would do, perhaps. On the Happy New Year, may all your virtuous aspirations be fulfilled spontaneously for the benefit of all dear Mother sentient beings. 2 key phrases. 1, dear Mother sentient beings. In Buddhism, it's believed we all live innumerable lives, and every creature here has been our mother, and we've been mother to every other creature here. If you don't believe that, we can still regard everybody as a mother creature. And the second phrase, may your virtuous aspirations be fulfilled spontaneously. That's pointing out to the power of wishes, prayers, intention, aspiration, motivation. I think in today's time, we underestimate the power of aspiration. We constantly send best wishes to each other, everything, best wishes, every letter is signed with best wishes. I don't think we mean it seriously. I think it's become a convention, just best wishes. Wishes have power. We think maybe this is magical thinking, this is superstition. Maybe not. Maybe the reason we think it's magical thinking is because we come to view the world in a materialistic way, a materialistic view of reality. And that perhaps is also a misreading of science and scientific knowledge. No wonder in the modern culture we are obsessed by objects and ignore the power of subjectivity, of human or sentient consciousness. We treat other subjects as if they were devoid of the capacity to feel. We treat them as mere objects, as mere instruments for our satisfactions. We view others as means to our ends, not as ends in themselves. But as the Dalai Lama has pointed out in all his Mind Life conferences and all his engagement with scientists, all his writings with scientists, at the quantum level, when you look at things at the subatomic level, even so-called insentient matter, forget sentient creatures, even so-called insentient matter, quantum particles, like electrons, photons, which are the building blocks of everything, building blocks of this wooden stuff here, building blocks of you and I, everything is built of quantum particles like electrons and protons. All of them react to the observing consciousness. There is no independent objective reality out there which is perceived by a perceiving consciousness. So quantum mechanics tells us everything is a particle and a wave, and those are probabilities. The way you observe them, the scientific experiment that you use, they manifest as particle or waves. There is no objective reality out there independent of our observing consciousness. Which means that reality is a co-construction. The subject and the object co-construct reality, and the empirical evidence at the scientific level is indisputable. And if this is true at the quantum level, cannot this happen at the macro level? Is it not possible that our thoughts, our emotions, our wishes, our aspirations influence so-called objective reality? That is a truly empowering insight. It means by changing our mind, we may be able to influence our individual and collective destinies. To conclude, let's conclude where one began. One word shall suffice: kindness. And the Dalai Lama has often said that kindness is nothing but wise selfishness. As he has often said, if you wish others to be happy, practice compassion. But equally, if you wish to be happy, practice compassion. Compassion is sharing, kindness, selflessness. But selflessness is not the opposite of selfishness, because selflessness gives joy, and we all want joy. It is just wise selfishness. Selflessness is selfishness. So let's be kind to others. Let's be kind to ourselves. Let us not confuse pleasure with joy. Pleasures are fine, and some pleasures are required to sustain ourselves. And as long as they're wholesome, there's nothing wrong with them. But pleasure can never substitute for joy. Joy only comes from matri, friendship, and from kindness. That in turn comes from the wisdom of recognizing our true nature. Then there's freedom from tana, trishna. That's mukti, nirvana. Thank you. And may all the deliberations of this event, so thoughtfully organized by Geshe Doji in Tibet House on behalf of His Holiness, may the merit generated from all these deliberations go to help His Holiness realize his noble vision and mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Vivek Suneja ji. Now we came to the end of the inaugural session, and before we conclude, I, on behalf of Tibet House, would like to thank our chief guests, Honorable Sigam Mr. Pimpa Singh Cho and Dr. Nirupama Rao ji, and our keynote speaker, Professor Vivek Suneja ji, and our director, Venerable Geshe Dajidamdilla, and to all our esteemed speakers and the guests, and for accepting the invitation and gracing this occasion. And also I would like to thank the participants who took your time and come here for the conference. And I hope you will take the valuable learnings from this forum and will continue to touch each of our lives and on our way forward. So, and I would also request now our chief guest and keynote speaker, Venerable Geshe Dajidamdilla, to kindly remain on stage for a group picture. Sim